Hi Tom's pedroatlarge here. Thank you for your video about your friend who got the hassle in Texas at the airport. And listening to what you were saying and to the implication that your friends, well, it wasn't an implication, you said it clearly, your friends hadn't had any such trouble at New York. It was interesting that I was listening just the other week to a guy, an Englishman, speaking on our Radio 4, one of our national BBC radio channels, and he was talking about a little bit of local difficulty he'd had in New York. Now, the guy had said that he'd been having a crisis of conscience about his personal identity before visiting New York. The particular conflict that was going on in his mind was this. He was thinking to himself, am I an Afro-Caribbean or am I an Englishman? Therefore is my identity Afro-Caribbean or is my identity British? He went to New York. He went with a friend who evidently was a white German, and as they were walking along the street in New York, this policeman just comes up to him and says, "Get off the street." And he said that he was stunned by the approach because nothing like it had ever happened to him before, and he had, fortunately, his British passport in his back pocket. And he described his conversation with the officer, which basically went along the lines about, who do you think you are to tell me to get off the street? It ended up with the officer, once he could see that the guy was in fact English and a British citizen, apologising profusely, wishing him a nice day. The man added that the experience sorted out the problem of what his identity was. He was very glad to be British. I don't suppose that the New York Police Department have a particular policy that says pick out black people and toss them off the street. Maybe somebody over there can tell me, well, actually, yes, they do. But it's got me thinking what you were saying, and that is that the real issue is just what's in our own heart, and this whole question of tolerance, not tolerance of things which are evil and things which harm other people, but tolerance of different choices that people make. Tolerance has a bad name, and certainly in the UK it's associated with things such as appeasement and what happened before the war with our politicians trying to appease Hitler rather than stand up to him. But I recall a time when I was in Greece and I was spat at, and that wasn't a pleasant experience. I wasn't actually doing anything at the time, I was just walking along. But the reason I was spat at was because the town I was walking in had a very bad time during the Second World War under the Germans, when the Germans attacked Greece. And there was a feeling there amongst Greeks that the British Army had let them down. The British Army was driven into the sea, quite literally, by the Germans, so they didn't really have too much say in the matter. But I've been at that end of it. I've been at the end. Obviously I wear a beard, and there have been times when I've had people say unpleasant things because I have a beard, or suggest it's not the thing to wear, etc., etc. Where am I leading in this? Quite simply, it's in our hearts to pick on those who we identify as being marginalised in our society, the society that is, that we perceive should exist. And I don't think it is something that's limited to Texas airports, or indeed Texas, or indeed New York or Greece. It's everywhere. And come back to this whole point. A far better word than tolerance is respect. I'm discovering as I get older that respect is one of the single most important things that each one of us can take on board for forming our relationships with those around us. Because walking in respect means that you can walk with those with whom you don't agree, and yet do so amicably. But the big crime of terrorism is that by its very actions it has ceased to respect other humans with whom they don't agree. And that is a great tragedy. And it may seem a long way from a little bit of petty bureaucracy or bureaucratic abuse in an airport to the question of terrorism, but in fact it isn't, because all these issues are of the human heart, and that is what we need to address. But the only way we can address it is individually. Politicians have tried appealing to the better side of human nature, and it doesn't really work. As you can see, I don't know about your country, but there's suspicions around the world that politicians, a lot of them, are self-serving and self-aggrandizing individuals who really take the main chance. I think that's very unfair on a lot of politicians, many of whom, and some of whom I've met, actually do have a sincere regard for seeing society improve and become fairer. But it all ends up with respect, Tom. I'm sure of it. If we can respect one another, we've made a giant leap in our quest to see peace on earth. I think that's a good place to stop. Goodbye.